Okay, we are peering into the future here, folks, via the Urantia book. If you've never read the Urantia book, highly recommended. This is over 2,000 pages of a revelation by advanced celestial beings. It covers everything: origin, history, and destiny. And since these beings are advanced and they've seen civilizations play out on countless numbers of planets, they have a bit of insight here, folks. And when they talk of the future, it is very searing. 2084. Read this with an open mind, regardless of your relationship with this being. Just open up your mind, allow something new to come in, some new light. And this truly is world-changing, life-changing type of stuff here. We're on part 2. This is the future. And this is a high spiritual ideal, people. Remember, mankind has an overabundance of ideas. You can see that in our various political leaders or billionaires. Like, look at your Peter Thiels or your Elon Musk. Have all these ideas. But they are poverty-stricken when it comes to ideals. And that's why they can't get it together. Whether that be out of their own weakness, which could be, or maybe they are purposely corrupted, undermining the system. They could be well-meaning, folks. We don't know. I don't know. I can't judge that person. I can't judge and say what they're at or whatever. They could be a product of this world, chewed up and spit out, and sociopathic. Who knows? Or maybe not. Maybe they're well-meaning. Maybe they're lost on their journey. The point is that when you have an ideal, people will know it. You will be a very convicted type of person, not a wishy-washy with silly ideas. And remember, the ideal stems from deity and divinity. So it's not, well, whose ideal? You know, people will, savvy postmodernists will say, whose ideal is that coming from? Which do we want, the left-wing ideal? Do we want the right-wing ideal? But you'll see, if the ideal comes from God, then it is for all. Okay, here we go. No social system or political regime which denies the reality of God can contribute in any constructive and lasting manner to the advancement of human civilization. That will never happen. This is like saying no university which denies the reality of physics can contribute in a constructing manner to the advancement of the students. This is just a reality, people. So if you're denying that, it's not saying push it down the people's throats. So it's still a separation of church and state. But it's not an atheistic type of thing. It says we must deny God. God isn't good for this world, which a lot, and unfortunately, even though I agree more with the left of their policies and things like that, that is one thing that they are more in the camp of saying we need to have a denial of God. And the right at least has that, even though you'll see it is encumbered by this Christian nationalism, which is really taking it away and making, see, that's where it's church, okay? That's separated from church. We need to separate that. Here, look at this. But Christianity, as it is subdivided and secularized today, presents the greatest single obstacle to its further advancement. So it is saying Christianity isn't the way, folks. Especially is this true in the Orient. The people in the Orient, remember this is in the 50s, so if you're looking at that and say, oh, that's an old-fashioned word. The people of the Orient are why would they want to accept, it's a lower culture is what we have here in the United States where I am. And it's a culture about what can I get? Hey, I'll whatever, if I can step on this guy. And we've been programmed like that from birth. Not only just in idea and ideal to have this split and this selfish, self-centered attitude, what somebody would call anti-God attitude or anti-Christ attitude, but we've also been programmed through the chemicals as far as your alcohols that are designed to not help you have the full and total picture. I mean, how can you put the full picture together? All of the different food addictions and everything like that. It's systematic. It's systematic, folks. So we can give anybody a pass. And that's what mercy is. We're not judging them. We're allowing them to, get that past, but we don't have to stand for, we don't have to let it be the world system of things. We can take back. It should be the people, the aware beings who are in control of the world. Ecclesiasticism is at once and forever incompatible with that living faith, growing spirit, and first-hand experience of the faith comrades of Jesus in the brotherhood of man, in the spiritual association of the kingdom of heaven. So that's just basically saying ecclesiasticism, or your Christianities and stuff. And the same thing goes with Buddhism. What if Buddhism, we would reject Buddhism here because of the fact, one, that it denies God, and two, there's so much ritual associated with that. Do you want to wake up every day and shave a young boy's head as he lines up, to do his prayers and this and that, and spin this prayer wheel and stuff? So we would reject that. We would reject Judaism if we weren't, programmed into that at a young age. We would say, hey, what am I doing? Going around cleaning all this and that, trying to make everything kosher and stuff. Not that it doesn't have it has good ideas, folks. That's a good thing, to be clean about your habits and stuff like that, to not eat animal, but they shouldn't eat any animal. There's no difference between a pig or a cow or whatever. Brotherhood of man and the spiritual association kingdom of heaven. The praiseworthy desire to preserve traditions of past achievement often leads to the defense of outgrown systems of worship. Here it is. The well-meant desire to foster ancient thought systems effectually prevents the sponsoring of new and adequate means, and methods designed to satisfy the spiritual longings of the expanding and advancing minds of modern men. It's crystallization. It is stagnation. And remember, progress is the watchword in the universe, and that's individually in your own life, collectively. And when we have that ideal, that's an ideal. Progress is an ideal. That's the difference. When we have that ideal, then we will not only turn our own lives individually around, which can happen at any time, even if the world system of things is corrupted and not going your way, whatever, if you're not one of the very few. And even then, if enough individuals change, all right, so that's what we're gearing for here, folks, is that if enough of them change, then we can have that world change with those ideals, but we have to make a break from those chains and shackles that are holding us back, individually and collectively. Always working on two levels. Likewise, the Christian churches of the 20th century stand as great but wholly unconscious obstacles to the immediate advancement of the real gospel, the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth. And if you're somebody who has kind of woken up out of a religion and is now looking back at it, and you're saying to yourself, oh, they're just so... It's a cult, really. It's a cult. Because it's just not the real teachings. They focus so much on the cross. That would be like if Jesus was done in an electric chair, which was what he would be done in today. I'm sure you may have heard this analogy. It'd be like everybody wearing an electric chair around their neck, parading around the electric chair. Jesus died on the electric. He was murdered. He was, it was, why celebrate that? That's not the celebratory thing. And that's just, the forces of evil are just rejoicing in that. They're saying, wow, that's great. They have this bloody image of Jesus on the cross with this dying, because that gets the ratings. That gets people in the paintings and everything from back in the day. That got their juices flowing, folks, because it's that sensationalism. And that was what helped launch it originally, because Paul sensationalized all that, and other apostles, and it did that was important. So that's why we just can't blame anything or say people are dumb or stupid or anything like that. It's just the way that it is. It's the way that it went, but now it's time for a new way. And that's what this book is, and it represents Jesus' life in a way that is about his teachings, his simple teachings that are world and life changing. Not about all the dogmatism around his execution, which has no bearing whatsoever on God's attitude, and that is another reason that people will and should and do reject Christianity, because they say, Why would that change God's attitude? A ransom. And then you'll see the Christians have to go in this long mental gymnastics thing, and there's no settling those two standpoints. The fact that Jesus, did he change it? Did he change God's attitude or did he not? Was he a ransom or was he not? Many earnest, of course he was not. We understand a God, of love. Many earnest persons who would gladly yield loyalty to the Christ of the gospel find it very difficult enthusiastically to support a church which exhibits so little of the spirit of his life and teachings. Exactly. Even your Catholicism, all the dead, everything's a dead tradition, folks. It's politics. It's whatever. And if this is something that changed your life and saved your life, keeping you off the streets, that's fine. Go for it. But looking forward, if you stagnate, then look to a living truth, okay? That's the spiritual ideal. Even this book, and its book is very wise to say, this is only a one flag point in eternity. It's going to be upgraded, advanced, and that sort of thing. Revelation is never definitive. That's a one line. That shuts down all of Christianity. Well, you can't shut down all of it, though. And that's where the confusion, that's why we have to be aware beings, because we don't want to throw out those good ideals within Christianity. God, son and daughtership, this and that. Okay. So little of spirited life and teachings have been erroneously taught. He founded, in which they have been erroneously taught. Right. Jesus didn't find any of that stuff. Jesus did not found the so-called Christian church, obviously. But he has, in every manner consistent with his nature, fostered it as the best existent exponent of his life work on earth. So, again, all right, we give the monkeys a hammer, and they might not build the Sistine Chapel with it, but if we can just at least get them to hold the hammer until they could pass it on to somebody who can build the Sistine Chapel, that's what he would want to do. If the Christian church would only dare to espouse the Master's program, thousands of apparently indifferent youths would rush forward to enlist in such a spiritual undertaking, and they would not hesitate to go all the way through with this great adventure. It's a hard thing to present, folks, because we hear even hearing the name Jesus is going to turn a lot of youths off, because they're going to say, oh, I went to a church and they tried to get me to stay. They promised me a skate park. And then after the skate park, they said that I needed to stay, blah, 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 blah. Christianity. So we have to unencumber that name from that. Christianity is seriously confronted with the doom embodied in one of its own slogans. A house divided against itself cannot stand. The non-Christian world will hardly capitulate to a sect-divided Christendom. The living Jesus is the only hope of a possible unification of Christianity. The true church, the Jesus Brotherhood, is invisible, spiritual, and characterized by unity, not necessarily uniformity. We say that line. I say that line a lot here. Write that on your heart and embed that into your soul. This is what the whole entire universe is about, folks. Unity, not uniformity. Unity under God. Now, remember, when you're dealing with getting youths into a spirituality, what they will soon to begin to understand is that they'll start to access very deep avenues, which will seemingly at first be of the mind, things that maybe your Easterns have accessed in their yoga pursuits, in their meditation types of pursuits, things like astral travel, leaving the body. All of these sorts of things are real, and you can do it if you haven't already. It just takes a focus and a dedication. There's so much out there spiritually. It's not just about, you're really going to start to become superhuman. That's what this spiritual path, remember, it goes from animal to super animal, which is the level that most people are at here on this planet. Well, I don't know about most, but many that you witness are still at the level of super animal. Then you become human. Then it's superhuman. That's the next stage in our progress. Now, you can do that at your own pace. You can do it here and now. They might call it like the Marancha state. But then after that, then you become a first stage spiritual being or entity. At that point, you're taken off the planet. Only a few have been able to achieve that and have been taken off the planet because they're done here. You don't need that. But on the Mirancha state, I think you can have the choice if you're taken on or off. But Jesus, for instance, he stayed on. He achieved that Mirancha state. They call it enlightenment in the East, and this is what we need to foster in young people, is that there is so much more to progress beyond, to experience, to attain, that is a reality. And if we lead by examples, that we attain that. And how do we do that? That's self-mastery. That's the level beyond faith. Remember, faith grants you the eternity to keep on having time to master yourself and to fuse with your adjuster. Remember that line in the Urantia book? It was something about when somebody's properly spiritualized, they are delivered from the handicaps of time and the limits of space. That, folks, is what you're talking about when you're talking about your astral traveling. That's just a word symbol. You know, it's like a deep state of meditation. You go hither and yon, basically. And lucid dreaming is another way to describe it. And you're exploring vast universes and things like that. And people can attain this. So if it's not just like, what is spiritual? Oh, well, it's... But there surely is that other side, which is the nitty gritty. It's just making good decisions. It's just dealing with your neighbor in a loving way. It's not all the amazing delivery from time and handicaps of time and space and all of that sensational type of stuff, but that is an aspect of it that people can attain. And but a lot of it is truly that nitty gritty. You might go a whole lifetime with any profound spiritual experience, maybe because you're maybe that's just not your timeline. And so that's where that faith comes in. You really have to hunker down and say, you know, well, I can't get it together to try to do this self-mastery here and now, blah, blah. So, this is the sect divided. People aren't going to get into it. So you can make it interesting for people if when they truly understand. I mean, even this book is just like, reveals a fascinating understanding of God that is just literally beyond the mind, but it starts even getting the mind to work in a way that's like you're starting to look into this eternity, to grasp just a little bit of God the Supreme, which is the most of God that humans can actually grasp, they say, is God the Supreme. But then there's God the Ultimate and God the Absolute, and you can just start to peer in unqualified absolute. And I believe they call the thought adjusters the qualified absolute, which is actually within you. Where were you here? Spiritual fruit of faith. Not necessarily. All right. Unity, not uniformity. Uniformity is the earmark of the physical world of a mechanistic nature. Blah. We don't like uniformity. Spiritual unity now is the fruit of faith, union, with the living Jesus. That's what unity is. And that's just a reality, people. It's just it's like gravity. Okay? So whether that name makes you feel ill because of the fact you're associating it with your Christendom, or whether you love that name, folks, it's just a reality. Okay? You can think of it as a spiritual gravity if you want. And they do talk about that, the spiritual gravity circuit of the sun. The visible church should refuse longer to handicap the progress of the invisible and spiritual brotherhood of the kingdom of God. And this brotherhood is destined to become a living organism in contrast to an institutionalized social organization. It may well utilize such social organizations, which is fine. Go to your church, whatever. That's great. It doesn't say. It's not saying burn the Bible. It's just saying put it aside for now. It may well utilize, but it must not be supplanted by them. Okay, folks? Wow. The whole structure is in place with all of these churches already. Imagine if they just had this book here, folks. And, maybe some of them don't want a book and they're more about having auto-revelation to yourself rather than, and that's fine too, apocalyptic. But if they're true, then they're going to be tapping into the same things. But the Christianity of even the 20th century must not be despised. Exactly. That's hard for me, honestly, because I'd say, oh, come on, we got to get over it. I look at it as this exactly as I said, this big handicap. So then you have to access your higher self, my higher self, to say, all right, well, there is a lot of good there, and I do try to emphasize that. It is the product of the combined moral genius of the God-knowing men. Look at that. Your Pauls and whoever's of many races during many ages. See? They did foster that. We can't crush that whole person's life now because we invented something new. Well, not invented, that's just a metaphor. And say, yeah, your life was for nothing. All you did was foster BS. No, they were against it. They were up against it. They did the best they could, and they're handing the baton. And it has truly been one of the greatest powers for good on earth. And therefore, no man should lightly regard it, notwithstanding its inherent and acquired defects. There you go. Okay, so it really did change the world. Well, not change, but it was good. Christianity still contrives to move the minds of reflective men with moral emotions. Yeah, and you see that. I see people that, like I said, they would be out in the streets if they didn't find this type of thing. But there's no excuse for the involvement of the church in commerce, in politics. That's what makes me like, oh, how could you people be so intertwined with politics? You're so easily to be able to be deceived. What is commerce? That's your Musk. Politics, that's your Trump. And they're all in line with them, right? And that's the cult that comes in. Because when you combine those two things, now whoever's doing commerce, because he's your cult leader, he's going to be doing it great. Even if he's, massively just pulling the wool over your eyes for their own self-enrichment. And not that they don't have good ideas and stuff like that. So it's not complete, try to, totally knock their characters and that sort of thing. But they definitely don't have this, okay? Such unholy alliances are a flagrant betrayal of the master. That's what they're engaged in when they engage in this merger of both. Look we have to take, that is not a wishy-washy word. That's not a bleeding heart type of word. That's a flagrant betrayal. And the genuine lovers of truth will be slow to forget that this powerful institutionalized church has often dared to smother newborn faith and persecute truth bearers who chance to appear in unorthodox raiment. This book, okay? That's one example. But remember, folks, the forces of evil get their hands into these churches and understand that, how are we going to undermine Jesus' teaching? Very simply, all we have to do is encumber it with commerce and politics, and boom. It's all too true that such a church, and now, okay, I'll just make one more thing, and then we'll get moving on here. There's even, I see a lot of your left-wing people are having the message of Jesus of Nazareth. They're saying, we need to take care of people, folks. We can't just have people out there in the streets injecting themselves. We got to get everybody a bed, get everybody health care. And they'll say, it's communist, it's communist. That is caring for people. There's just a wise way to go about it. So it's so weird. And I've even heard left-wing commentators say, dude, we have more of the ideas of Jesus than you have in your thing. He wouldn't be doing wars, trying to go in and invade a country, right? Offensive type of thing. And so it's just a strange time here, people. Because they would also say, we hate the church, we don't believe in God and stuff like that. Not all, but, I'm generalizing here. But the generalizations they can be drawn. It is all too true that such a church would... Why am I able to draw that generalization? If you look at, for instance, support for the politics of Donald Trump, it's 20% of the country is Christian evangelical type of support that he has for it. So it really is, boom, a really divisive line there drawn, people. And if they read this one line, they would know that that's not of Jesus' teaching, okay? It is all too true that such a church would not have survived unless there had been men in the world who preferred such a style of worship. Many spiritually indolent souls crave an ancient and authoritarian religion of ritual and sacred tradition. So that's indolent. They're just, they just want that daddy to take care of them rather than being like, oh, I gotta put on my big boy pants and freaking buck the system here with, this ecclesiastical thing. And it's not even... Human evolution and spiritual progress are hardly sufficient to enable all men to dispense with religious authority. So it's never going to just evolve. It's just a nature of the men. And the invisible brotherhood of the kingdom may well include these family groups of various social and temperamental classes. Look at that, people. They're temperamental. It's like, it's daddy issues type of thing, It's like, and then it's so fitting. Temperamental classes, if they are only willing to become truly spirit-led sons of God. See, it's saying that's antisocial behavior right there, people. Temperamental like that, that's your sociopathic type of behavior. With when somebody does the slightest thing, and then you have to be the big man who pulls out his gun. Then. But if they can do spirit over mind over matter. They can override that aspect, which it might be genetic, 50% genetic, 50% programming from society of God. But in this brotherhood of Jesus, there is no place for sectarian rivalry. That doesn't happen. Group bitterness, nor assertions of moral superiority and spiritual infallibility. So it's recognizing that that's a thing, that's not going to be the ideal of society, to have people flipping out at the drop of a dime. But it's saying, hey, even if that's where you are, we understand. Remember, Jesus looked at his men as weak, not wicked. But you can't say that they're weak. You could just try to you got to be tactful about fostering this, nor assertions of moral superiority and spiritual infallibility. All right, well, there's a whole other page on this part, okay? So we'll do that in the next section, but there you go. All right, please like and subscribe. Hope you got something out of the video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time.